What we're going to watch here is the presentation that concluded that Trimet is doing considerably better than they were doing last year. And this is a very interesting presentation. And I will cut in as need be. So let's start hearing this presentation about this Trimet survey.
And it's always nice to deliver good news, and today we're going to do some of that. So just real briefly, if you don't know DHM or haven't had a chance to meet James or myself, DHM is a local public opinion firm. We've been doing work here in the Portland metro area for about the last 40 years now, although we do work across Oregon and Northwest and the country as well, and transportation and transit are one of the issues we work on most often and frequently in one of our specialty areas. So it's a real pleasure to be able to work here right in our backyard and with Trimet. We did recently do the Attitude and Awareness Survey, and it was a survey of 1,000 residents here in the Portland metro region, and that's a really great sample size. We don't often get a chance to talk to that many people for one project, and so it's a really credit to you to make that investment, because not only do we get real accurate results of the region as a whole, but we'll be able to talk about today and some of the other information we provided, really look at breakdowns by county, by demographics, and other important characteristics. So
I have problems right off the bat with a survey that selects 1,000 residents out of 750,000 and somehow elevates that to the status of being accurate for the 750,000. So right off the bat, I question it. But let's keep listening.
The survey was done last fall. It was done November 13 through 18. We do work real hard to set demographic quotas and quotas on other important characteristics such as area to really ensure that we have a representative sample, and we do. This is a really great sample. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. And for those who keep track of such things, the margin of error for a sample of 1,000 is 3.1% at the 95% confidence interval.
So who's determining that 3.1% margin of error, 95% confidence level? Just because that gentleman makes that statement, how do we actually know that statement has any truth? We don't, do we? He's making a statement. We're taking it as truth. It's government propaganda.
An opportunity to get real accurate results. So top line, sort of just to let you know sort of overall feelings. First, Trimet positives are up from the last time we had an opportunity to talk to folks in 2013. And we'll be going into a lot of those details, but it does come in a broader environment, so just a little stage setting. We are seeing the public more optimistic broadly here, whether it's in the region, the state, or the country. And we're also seeing some less worry about the economy as well, whether we're looking at unemployment rates or people's projection of the state of the economy or their personal financial situations. So as this continues, it has a halo effect on all sorts of things, and that's one piece of the puzzle.
That makes perfect sense. If people are feeling better about their daily lives, they're likely to feel better about everything around them, and that includes Trimet. So I think that would be a relevant and truthful statement.
The other, of course, is the good work that you've done, the increased service that you've provided over the last.
Now that there is a highly suspicious statement. He's complimenting Trimet over the work they've done. Now that right there leads me to wonder about the survey in its totality, because who is he to make a subjective judgment about the work that Trimet has done? That's none of his affair. His affair is to get feedback from the public. But here he is making a subjective statement which leads us to believe that he's already bought off by Trimet. He's already saying, thanks to you, Trimet, things are better. Brings into question immediately the entire survey.
Year, the infrastructure investments you made with the light rail and the Telecom crossing, the contract negotiations with settlement with the union. So there's a broad sort of public opinion climate that's out there that certainly has an impact, but your good work as well. So just so larger stage setting, so as we go through these numbers, keep those things in mind. So the highlights, just what are the top lines? Overall approval of how Trimet is doing. So in our 2014 survey, 76% approved of Trimet. That's up 10 points from 2013 and up 5 points from 2010.
Now I've looked at the actual survey, and they've bunched together two categories. One is approve of Trimet approve of what Trimet is doing, and marginally approve of what Trimet is doing. So they've taken the marginally approved and added it to the totally approved, and they've come up with the 76% number. It's deceitful in the sense that they're saying everybody approves when a marginally approved response should not be counted as, oh, we think Trimet is great, because it's not. So this is highly questionable.
The survey prior to that. So 76% is a great number on its own. 66%, frankly, for all the public agencies that we talked to is a good number. It was slightly down in 2013, but in general, when you see a number of 66%, that's pretty good for a public agency. But a 10-point bump in the last 10 years. So that's the top line number. We're going to go through, add some more context throughout the slides, but we saw positive feelings increase across the entire sort of suite of questions that we asked. Everything from approval of the bus system, which was a 13-point increase from 2013, approval of MAX, 15-point increase from 2013.
So these people are trying to convince us that the approval rating for MAX from last year to this year's is 15% higher. Now, that might make sense if MAX ridership was up 15%, but MAX ridership is actually dead flat. It's been flat for years. So the ridership figures do not verify the survey figures. If 84% of the people thought MAX was great, why isn't the ridership higher? Something is not correct with that figure. The ridership and the satisfaction ratings do not correlate. Once again, highly suspicious. Something is wrong here.
Perceptions of bus safety and MAX safety also increased, as did overall satisfaction with their experience with Trimet. And as General Manager McFarland mentioned earlier, the percentage of our survey respondents who rode Trimet in the last year is at 80%, a 6-point increase from 2013. So across everything that we asked about, whether it's satisfaction or safety or ridership, everything was up from 2013. All right, so those are the top line numbers. I'm going to try to give you some more context as we go through. And some of it is just customer state of mind. And one question that gets asked in your survey and a lot of survey work is this right direction, wrong track question. It's a great question to ask because we have a good sense of what a particular number means for a community, but also across time. And you can see in this particular chart, it's been asked in the region since 2000. And the green line is the right direction number, the orange is the wrong track number. And then if you wanted to add up to 100%, there's some don't knows, which we didn't include on this chart. And you can see that that green line really tracks what you probably recall from the economy and the broader sort of environment that was happening in the region and nationally. So in early 2000s, 68%. September 11th, war, the economy, everything that was going on in the early 2000s, we saw that number drop. Again, this is for the Portland metro region. Through the early 2000s, it rose to a peak again of 67%, 2008. And then as the economy declined, we saw a sharp decline in right direction numbers. And it's back up again to 60.
Well, as you can see, if you look at that chart, he's talking about the economy, but the dissatisfaction rate was much higher before the so-called Great Recession hit. So once again, we see there's something wrong with his analysis because he's saying as the economy got worse, the dissatisfaction rate got higher. But look at the chart closely. You'll see the dissatisfaction rate was highest long before the Great Recession, a couple years ahead. So that's inaccurate. He's sitting there making an inaccurate statement.
% the last couple of years. Now, what 60% mean? You can see what it means historically in the Portland metro region, but just a little context as well. we get an opportunity to do a lot of statewide surveys at DHM Research, and we've seen this number increase statewide from about mid-40s to mid-50s in the last year. So there's a general feeling, not just here in the metro region, but across the state, that things are moving in the right direction. There is great variance across the state, and 60% across the state is a good number. It's as high as we've surveyed in any community in the last year is Corvallis, which is about 70% of their community residents saying that their community was heading in the right direction.
So this company is basically doing all the surveys for all the governmental units. This is the company that every governmental unit hires. I have a problem with that immediately. Every government uses them to give them the numbers they want. That is not an unbiased opinion as far as I'm. If all the governmental units are using this one company, how can we be satisfied that this one company is actually giving us decent information? I don't think it's possible.
But we've seen some communities, particularly in southern Oregon, where it's in the low 40s. So Jackson County, Klamath County. So a 60% number, a little bit of context historically, a little bit of context for how it compares to the state and some other communities, but a relatively high number. So I showed you the 76% approval of Trimet earlier on. If you go to the very end of this line, you see that number again, 76%. We've been asking the question for the last number of years. It goes back to 2007. And you can see the peak was 80% 2008. It did decline a little bit through a few years, but then a big...
Now the peak rider approval, public approval of Trimet was in 2008. That was the highest approval. That's 1 year after the so-called Great Recession hit. So the Great Recession hits, and then 1 year later, the public thinks Trimet is great. Does that kind of create any question in your mind? It sure does for me. So after the Great Recession hit, all of a sudden everybody loves Trimet. Something wrong.
Jump, as we've been talking about, from 2013 to 2014, again from 66% to 76%. So that's overall. Then you can see these other lines. The blue lines represent approval of the bus system, and the orange line approval of the MAX system. You can see the trend line is very similar. It is notable that historically bus has been somewhat lower than MAX, and it has been every year, and it is again this year. So MAX approval 84% now, nearly as high as we've ever measured it, and bus 78% now, and also near the top of who we've ever measured. So that's overall approval, and one of the most important things about people's satisfaction and approval of the system is just their sense of safety. So how are things doing there? So just ground you in this chart. The green bar represents numbers from 2010, the blue from 2013, and the orange from 2014, so it tracks historically that way. And then on the left side is bus numbers, and the right side are MAX numbers. And so the question that was asked is, from what you know or may have heard, do you disapprove or approve of the job Trimet is doing to ensure safe operations of buses or MAX trains? And you can see here the vast majority of survey participants said that, yeah, they do approve. 76% for bus, 79% for MAX. Both numbers are up from 2013. So for bus, up from 67%, and for MAX, up from 68%.
I don't really know what to make of those kind of numbers. It's curious to me that over the last year, all of a sudden, all these people have just switched their point of view. I will only say this. The vast majority of Trimet users go through their Trimet experience without any reaction at all. They have no reaction to Trimet. Most trips on Trimet will happen without any kind of drama. But as somebody who listens to the operations daily, I find it odd that there's such an increase in satisfaction when the reliability has been so much worse. But, you know, once again, what do we know about who's doing this survey and how they're coming up with their numbers? But it would seem to me somewhat accurate that maybe 8 out of 10 people wouldn't have an issue with Trimet at all, because they're not, you know, they're not paying attention. They go use Trimet and they go home, and that's it. They're not paying attention to the operation. It would seem somewhat normal that 20% of riders would have had a bad experience, and the other 80% probably have had no real experience that would make them feel awful about Trimet.
So a 9 to 11 point increase. So just another data point for you. First, the important thing to know is most people are feeling that the operations are safe, and second, that they see an increase from a year ago. Another safety-related question that's asked in the survey is, have personal safety concerns ever prevented you from taking Trimet Max trains? This is really focused on Max, and you can see historically, this question goes back to 2007, that most folks say no. So in 2014, 77% said no. A personal safety issue has never prevented them from taking a Max train, which has been fairly consistent across the last 7 years, right around that upper 70s, low 80% number.
Once again, I don't really have a problem with that. 80% of people traveling on public transit probably do have an uneventful experience. The other 20% have a problem regards to safety. So I don't personally think that's an unreasonable conclusion to make. Is 80% okay, the other 20% not.
Now 22% did say yes. So they're important constituents as well, and if anybody has a safety concern, we certainly want to know who they are. Those who have safety concerns are more likely to be female. So 27% of females versus 17% of males. That's not inconsistent with what we've seen in lots of other contexts that have to do with safety. Females tend to have more safety concerns than males do. Also notable that non-riders, 31%, said that safety concern has stopped them from taking the Max versus 20% of riders. Not a surprise, if you have safety concerns, you're more likely to be a non-rider, that difference would exist, but it's good to be aware that that's the breakdown. 31% non-riders, 21% of riders. Another important aspect of approval and satisfaction with the agency and people's experience is reliability. Again, to ground you, on the left side here is bus, and the right side here is Max. And the question here was, from what you know or may have heard, how reliable service on Trimet buses or reliable service on Trimet Max? Now we were asked to rate this on a 1 to 7 scale, where 1 is not at all reliable and 7 is very reliable. So if you sort of take 4 there as your midpoint, and anything below there you would think that overall people are feeling that service is not reliable. Anything above is reliable with some degree of reliability. So for bus it's 5.5, and for Max it's 5.8, near the top of the scale. And for bus service, 48% gave it a rating of 6 or 7. So nearly half of the folks said that it's 6 or 7 at the very end, top of the scale. And for Max, it's 65% at the very top of the scale.
Seems like completely reasonable figures. They're accurate compilations. I think from what as somebody who listens to the operation, I think that those figures seem reasonable. They don't coincide with the 84% think Trimet's doing a good job, because it's only 60% here. So there's some kind of a question, why don't 84% think it's reliable when 84% think Trimet's on time, but only 60% think it's reliable? And not much difference across the region, just slight differences. For example, Multnomah County for buses, it's 5.6 at the high. For Clackamas, 5.4. So we're talking about differences of 1/10 of a point, very little differences. Similar for Max, for Multnomah County, 5.9, Clackamas, 5.7. Again, just 1/10 of a point differences. Good to be aware, but nothing that stands out as a particular concern for reliability, whether we're talking about differences by region, but also if you dig deeper into other demographics, for example, income, age, etc. Generally, these sorts of feelings are pretty consistent across the region. So what about ridership? As was mentioned earlier, 80% of adults
I should say adults. In this survey, I didn't mention earlier, it starts at 16. Most surveys are done with 18 and older, but we captured 16-year-olds in the survey as well. 16, 17-year-olds. So if you go to the far end of the chart here, 2014, the green line represents the percent of people who rode at least once in the last year. And that number is 80%, up from 74% in 2013, and consistent where it has been in past years. Actually, it's only 1 percentage point off of the high that's ever been measured in 2009. And if we look at those who are occasional, regular, or frequent, so these are people who ride at least twice a month. What proportion are they of the overall ridership? And that's that orange bar below, and you see it's at 41%, which held steady from 2013 to 2014. So
seems completely reasonable, consistent with what I see from my point of view. No problem with any of those figures.
About 40% of everybody that's out there is going to be riding Trimet at least twice a month, and 80% are riding at least once a year. It's hard to find 80% who do anything altogether in a year, so that's pretty remarkable and really speaks to the importance of the service.
I have a real problem with the way he proselytizes, the way he throws these compliments at Trimet. He's not supposed to be doing that. He's supposed to be soliciting feedback. He's not supposed to be adding this subjective feedback that he seems to be so attached to here. He's adding all kinds of subjective comments to this presentation, which makes me wonder about the objectivity of the entire presentation.
In the region. All right, so this breaks down a little bit more for you the degrees of ridership. So just to orient you to the slide here, the big pie chart represents rider frequency in 2014. If you want to compare to 2013, it's that smaller pie chart. Frequent riders, it's the slice that's green there. And those who ride almost every day. They represent about 1 out of 9% of all riders.
Completely reasonable figure. The last figures I have were the 12% of the Portland Metro residents actually use Trimet. So 9% frequent riders makes perfect sense.
Then regular riders are those who ride several times a week, another 10%. Then occasional, those who ride a couple times a month, represent 22%. And then infrequent, ride less than once a month, that's another 39% there. And you can see your non-rider group represents 20%. And this is probably familiar to you, but frequent riders tended to be in Multnomah County, younger, so under 34, have lower incomes and more likely to be minority. Non-riders were more likely to be in Clackamas County, be older, and be white. So that probably consistent with what you know, but it shows up here in the survey as well. We sort of look at frequency from who's a frequent rider, who's a non-rider. Those are the demographic characteristics. So we had what I think is a real interesting follow-up question among those who don't ride. So the question was, even though you don't ride Trimet, do you still value the benefits that Trimet provides to the region? And if they said yes, and 84% did, we asked a follow-up question, why? What is it about it? If you're not a rider, why do you still value it? So we listened to all the comments, typed them all in, coded them, and here are the categories that come out. Number one, half the people who said yes, they value it even though I don't ride. And the number one comment was it provides a form of transportation for.
This is not a surprising fact. I mean, anybody with any brains at all will understand that having public transportation available is a good thing, even if you don't use it. Because anybody who's taken their car in to be worked on for the day and who has jumped on a bus or a train to get home understands, yes, thank God we have public transportation when our car isn't working. So this is completely consistent with most people's view of the world. People don't really want to use transit, but they want to know that it's there.
Others. And I've been in a lot of qualitative focus group settings, whether it's here in the region or other parts of the state or up in Washington, talking about transit service. And for non-riders, this is one of the things that comes most often. that they recognize that there's a population out there that is transit dependent, or if not dependent, that it's a very important part of their means to get around.
I think he's way off the mark. I don't think people that don't use transit give one shit about the people that are transit dependent. I think he's way off the mark with that. As I said in my previous clip, people are happy to have the transit in case they need it. I don't really think people care about the people that don't have an option but transit. So I think he's making this part up.
And they see it as an important community benefit, whether if it's even if it's not for them. So just the fact that other people have access and mobility is a value that they have, and it's expressed here. Other reasons that people said that they value it is that, gosh, a family member uses it, a friend uses it, somebody who I care about uses it, and I care about that. Traffic congestion would be the third most mentioned reason that they value Trimet, value its service even though they don't ride.
Portland traffic congestion has gotten steadily worse every single year. So, you know, it doesn't work to decrease congestion, but I imagine if there was no Trimet, places like Highway 26 East would be completely unpassable. Obviously, they have some effect on transit, but it's not a particularly noticeable effect, and there's been plenty of studies that show that transit doesn't really affect congestion. It has some minor effect, but it's certainly overstated.
So that it provides a benefit for others, number one, also for family and friends, and reducing congestion would be up towards the top. So where are people going? So the
Blue sky is the question.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go back to the previous slide?
No.
Okay.
You're fine. Did any of the environmental benefits come up in the conversation? Or was that one of your questions?
Oh, disappear here.
There's good old Joe. He's the most inquisitive of the board members. He's always got questions and comments. To any of the environmental, well, what do you think congestion is, Joe? He just answered your question. Joe likes to just talk.
Okay, well, I'm not sure what I did. Oh, there we go.
You know, this is Multnomah County. But
Right, right. It comes up, well, here are the again, these are people who don't ride. Right? Yeah. So if we talk to people who are riders and why they ride, you're going to see certainly comments about environmental concerns for sure. Okay. But this particular breakdown is about
I'm just
people,
saying overall the whole
yeah.
survey. Okay. Curious.
So where are folks going? Number of different categories, everything from recreation to school, but the top sort of set there is our frequent regular riders. And you can see the number one thing that they're doing, 67% say that I'm taking to go to work. That's the primary reason that I go, or a reason that I go. For occasional infrequent riders, there it's more about recreation. And recreation is things like, you know, going to a Blazers game, going to a Timbers game, going to the zoo, you know, things like that, Saturday market, all those sorts of things. And then you can see the other categories as well in the frequency, everything from personal business to visiting family or friend. But if we look at, so the main categories, they are regular riders, going to work. Less regular riders are using it for recreation, among other things. So we had a question around transit dependency. And you'll see here on the far left, it's for all riders. We asked whether or not they take transit by choice or whether they're dependent on transit. And the vast majority are taking transit by choice. So 78% of all riders are choice. 22% say that they're transit dependent. But you have 40% now who are telling us that they're transit dependent, and 60% who said it's by choice. Those who are just riding it occasionally or infrequently, just 16% say indicate that they're transit dependent, and 84% by choice. And satisfaction, very positive numbers here. So just the question overall, how satisfied are you with the experience with Trimet? And again, our 2014 numbers are on the far right there. And the dark green on the lower part of the bar is the percent who say they're very satisfied. And then the lighter green, somewhat satisfied, and the top adds those two numbers.
I find that somewhat deceitful. The somewhat satisfied category is not saying we're satisfied, but it's okay. I mean, to lump that together with we're highly satisfied is a deceitful number there. Most people, I can't imagine most people would say they're not satisfied at all with Trimet. Trimet will get you where you need to go. Sometimes it will be a lot later than you think, but you will get there. So somewhat satisfied would be almost everybody's experience with Trimet. You'd only be completely dissatisfied if Trimet didn't get you where you go. The thing is, Trimet will get you where to go. It might not be timely, but it will get you there, especially if you're a max rider. So the somewhat satisfied being lumped in with the that's deceitful.
Together, but if you combine somewhat and very satisfied together in 2014, 87% of Trimet riders say they're satisfied with their experience. That's the highest that's been measured since 2007. 47% say that they're very satisfied, which is near the top that it's been measured. So very, very positive experiences that people are having out there. So related to satisfaction, related to everything else, is fares and value. So this question was asked, in general, how would you rate the value of transit service you receive for the fare paid? Would you say it's excellent, good, fair, or poor? And the green there has to do with is the excellent or good numbers. And then the orange are the fair and poor. But for all riders on the left, you can see that 67%, 2/3, say that they're getting good value. For frequent, that increases to 75%. For occasional and infrequent, that's 65%.
Here we have again the two categories of green. I would imagine it's somewhat satisfied, very satisfied. Again, they're lumping in two categories that don't really belong together in order to make it look better than it actually is.
Now, we do a lot of work asking people about their opinions of agencies, about government, and there's a lot of doom and gloom out there. It's perhaps getting a little bit better as things pick up with the economy in other ways, but generally we hear a lot of negativism and cynicism up there. So that you have 2/3 of all riders saying that they're satisfied with their service. 3/4 of those who ride regularly are satisfied with the value they're receiving. Those are quite positive numbers and should be commended for it. And then just a couple more slides just to give you a sense of how aware the public is of some of the major projects you have going on. One is the Portland-Milwaukee light rail line. You can see these numbers going back to 2007. They've increased steadily since then. 80% now say that they're aware of the Portland-Milwaukee light rail line.
I find that somewhat amazing that 20% of residents of this Portland metro area are not aware of the Portland-Milwaukee light rail line. That's 20% don't even know it exists. That's really astounding.
Not surprisingly, awareness is higher in Clackamas, Multnomah County. Clackamas 88%, so that they're aware in Multnomah County 83%. Somewhat lower in Washington County, 69%, but that makes sense given the geographic location. Not surprisingly, again, in sort of the broader context of who sort of pays attention to issues, but younger folks are less likely to be aware than older folks. Higher incomes more likely than lower incomes, and that's a pattern that we would see awareness of a lot of government services regardless of what we were asking about. So we asked a follow-up question for those who are aware of the Portland-Milwaukee light rail line, which was, in your opinion, what are the main benefits of the new light rail line? And you can see these are, again, open-ended comments where we listen and we type them all out, and then we code them into categories, and these are the categories of things that come out. And you can see the positive sentiments people have. Reduced traffic congestion, again, provides.
Reduces traffic congestion. Well, I get I hate to tell you people, but the new bridge carries no cars. It doesn't add any service. You're just changing from a 33 bus to a light rail vehicle. It's very unlikely that it's going to reduce any traffic congestion. So I'm not sure where they're getting those numbers.
It's a form of transportation connecting parts of the city. So the number one there, reducing traffic congestion, 22% is a benefit. Number two was providing a form of transportation for others or for themselves. And the connecting to parts of the city would be the third one there. But other ones that were mentioned too were extending public transportation, a direct line to Milwaukee, more accessibility, faster travel time. But those are the sorts of things that people are saying out there about the benefits. And then we asked a similar question for those who are aware of the Telecom crossing. I don't have a slide for it, but about 78% of people were aware of Telecom crossing, and the benefits that they recognized were also reducing traffic congestion, 18%. That is pedestrian bridge and crossing, 16%. So there's, of the things that people mentioned, high awareness of that. That's bike friendly, also 13%. Those were the top three, and you can see the other ones that were mentioned in the frequency as well. So big picture, satisfaction is up, approval is up, sense of safety is up for both MAX and for bus. Awareness of the light rail line and the Telecom crossing is high, and some of the reasons for that are here as well. I'll just, for those who really keep track of this stuff, I just want to emphasize that the survey really did, we worked real hard to make sure that it reflected the community. And not only did we set a lot of quotas to ensure that, but we've gone back and just double checked all our numbers too. And I want to assure you that this sample is just within a point or two if you look at the census figures by county, by age, by gender, by ethnicity, by income. So we really did work hard to ensure that we talked to a representative group of community residents. Also, I think it was about 40% cell phone, which is extremely high in this sort of survey world. So we worked real hard to ensure that cell phone only households were included. So you can feel real confident in the sample and the validity of the result. So with that, I'll turn it over to you with any questions that you may have. And thank you.
I have no reason to believe that these people aren't ethical and honest. As I said earlier, 1,000 residents out of 750,000. Is it really representative? I really don't know. I'm suspicious because Trimet reliability has not improved in the last year. It's actually gotten worse, but yet the public approval rating has gotten better. It doesn't make sense. And also, with this giant surge in public approval, why hasn't the ridership gone up an equal amount? The max ridership is just flat, and it's been flat for years now. We're talking 3 years, 4 years of just flat. So when he's talking about 84% approval, it doesn't correlate to the ridership figures. So there's a disconnect there, which makes me wonder about the statistics and the survey. And this company does all kinds of surveys for apparently lots of governments. I'm always somewhat skeptical of anything that's paid for by government. I have no faith in government. I think government lies to us as a part of daily business. They don't think anything about lying. They're trying to manipulate our opinion, so I wonder about that. And I also find this a little bit odd that it comes 1 week after that so-called study that rated Trimet Twitter as the best public response to Twitter was on Trimet. More positive tweets than negative. Now, I've been reading the Trimet tweets for years, okay? Long before Trimet started taking it serious. And the fact that they came up with a result that said were there more positive tweets, and I find that highly suspicious. It's not accurate. And I know that as somebody who reads the tweets daily. Now, the last couple of months, I've definitely noticed a change in what's being tweeted now. I don't know whether Trimet has engaged some kind of a program to put positive tweets out there, but in the last couple months, I've noticed a change, and that includes Facebook too. Now, this is after years of observing them. So we have two things that happen simultaneously. This study comes out, says Trimet is great on the tweets, and now we see this 10% jump in customer satisfaction. I find it suspicious because I don't see, from my point of view, as somebody who reads tweets and follows this material daily, that this code, it works. I don't see it as being honest. And my background with Trimet proves to me that they are not an honest company. They will lie. They do lie. So I have a lot of skepticism to this survey. I wish somebody would do a parallel survey that was not paid by Trimet to verify these findings.